One nation.
One Africa.
One nation.
One nation. One Africa. One nation. One Africa. Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Alikia Ngoma, the Administrative Assistant for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and member of the African People's Socialist Party, and I will be your MC for this morning. Today's study comes from the pamphlet, Our Standards of Party Life, which details the responsibility of every cadre aspiring member of our party. Being a revolutionary, a part of the Vanguard Party, is no little task. It requires us to practice revolutionary ideals and principles in all parts of our lives. It requires complete subordination to the needs and aspirations of our whole people, our yet-to-be-free nation. This reading is critical to us as party members and all those who are on the verge of becoming or have intention of becoming revolutionaries in our struggle for total liberation. This serves as a reminder for each of us, our daily work, our struggles that we must overcome in order to be the best sons and daughters of Africa. It is my honor to now present the best son of Africa, the leader of the African nation, living out the highest ideals of African internationalism, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru comrades, I want to welcome you to today's study. It is, as it has been stated already, our standard of party life. This is an extremely important study that we're involved in. This is the second study we've done since the 7th Congress of the party, where we've placed so much emphasis on the question of what it means to be in the African People's Socialist Party, how to be in organization of the type that is the African People's Socialist Party. And this is extremely important. It is always important, but it's especially important now coming out of our Congress, where we've given so much new direction to the work of the party, taking into consideration the conditions that we are confronted with in the world today as Africans, as peoples, as workers. And coming out of that Congress, we established for ourselves incredibly important new task. And we've placed more and more of the responsibility of the party into the hands of the membership of the African People's Socialist Party. It is a period of greater intensity in terms of what we have to do as an organization. We've divided all of our work, organized all of our work around the world, whether in Africa, whether here in the United States, Europe, et cetera, according to regions, where regional leaders, committees have the responsibility of organizing the party throughout Africa, throughout Europe, throughout North America, and every place else we are located. That's an extremely important thing. And then every regional committee leader has a responsibility of building the party throughout the different provinces and states, cities, communities, even prison wings and campuses throughout the world. That is how we organize, and that means that more and more responsibility for carrying out the task of the party will be resting in the hands of individual party members. It becomes increasingly difficult for somebody to satisfy the requirements of party membership by simply declaring that they're in the party. It means that all the individuals of the party do have the responsibility of getting out our newspaper. We've gone through a period of months prior to the Congress and the Congress itself, where we've laid out the political report to the Congress, the basic main resolution of the Congress, and then we've come from that Congress with other resolutions that give direction to the work. But critically, what has happened is this process has given the ability of every member of the party to be responsible for the success of the party. So it is a very important time. It is a time that also where we are confronted with this deepening crisis of imperialist white power. We see what appears to many to be the erratic behavior of the U.S. government, which is right now the shakily crowned emperor of the imperialist world. We've seen and heard the attacks that's being made against people, the people who from South America, the people in Africa, Haiti, and these various places coming from this same president. And then on the other hand, we've heard it's his liberal opponents who, while chastising this Trump regime for what it says and how it says it, defending more or less the same policies, said differently. So it is a very serious period. There's anxiety that abounds for people who are not armed with the African internationalist capacity for analyzing, understanding what is happening in the world. It has resulted in a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear. And what we are saying is that we don't have to be afraid. And people in our party, members of our party, have to step forward and assume the responsibility of leading our people and leading the entire revolutionary project of the world, of the oppressed peoples of the world, so that we can win our freedom. And the easiest thing in the world is for someone to be a party member when there are no criticisms, when everything is going well. When everything goes your way, it's the easiest thing in the world to be a member of the party. But the fact is that everything will not always go your way. And being involved in this work, being involved as an African in the world, means that we're going to be faced with contradictions all the time. And some of these contradictions will exist inside the party. We have an incredible task that we have to achieve as members of our party. Our rulers have worked in a very serious way to deter us from achieving the kind of serious forethought that will make this revolution possible. It has promoted a certain kind of irresponsibility among Africans and our forces. And in fact, it's a sort of chuckling undercurrent within ruling class societies of the bumbling and shuffling and African who can't come to terms with being in charge of our own affairs and certainly can't come to terms with getting rid of our oppressor. That's our task. That's what we have to do. We have to overcome all of that. And especially the African working class with no experience in really leading to a better future, where there is a general assumption among everybody who has any kind of power, semblance of power, and pretensions of power. It is a general assumption that the African working class is totally incapable of doing anything. We are the most slandered sector of the African population. But now the African working class must have advantage of its own revolutionary organization. That is what the African People's Socialist Party is. And it's not an easy task. And we have to become accustomed to the idea that the custody of the revolutionary project of the world that will liberate Africa, African people, and everybody is something in our possession. We are the ones who will have to make that happen, and we as individuals have to step up and assume the responsibility for doing that. And that means, among other things, that we have to share, get rid of these notions that's been imposed on us about we being the most central figure as individuals, and recognize that our significance as individuals is only as great as our individual interests and significance integrated into the aspirations and the task to liberate our people. So we're going to be looking at this chapter. And it's a relatively long chapter, and I wanted to raise a kind of self-criticism because it is a poorly edited, poorly copy-edited and edited product, as you will see as we go through this. We will not attempt to read and go through the entire chapter, but what we will do in our standards of party life is we will begin on page 3 and go to page 13. And then we'll follow that with between the pages of 15 through 19, and then we'll move to 23 to 28. So that's what our intentions are. Hopefully we'll be able to get all of this done. But I want to really welcome everybody who is in this study, and I really want to send an important shout out to members of our party, those of you who've taken this incredible step forward and who voluntarily assumed the responsibility for the liberation of Africa and African people, for the redeployment of revolutionary forces throughout the world, for uniting with the oppressed peoples everywhere so that we can build the kind of world that's needed. I can't overstate the significance of the responsibilities that we have volunteered for, because we step forward today with a certain kind of arrogance that the world can be changed, that we can make it happen, but it is going to require our functioning as the revolutionary organization the African People's Socialist Party is. We're going to have to live up to that, and that's where we are going from here. And I just want to say again that it's easy to be in the party when everything goes your way. When everything is all right, it's easy. But the fact is that everything will not go your way. And there are going to be criticism and self-criticism. We'll talk about that because we have a lot of new members and new leaders of the African People's Socialist Party who have no tradition of leading and being in the kind of organization that we are. And the kind of organization that we are is a revolutionary organization, and no experience that you've had in the past in terms of being in groups and fraternities and organizations prepared you to be a leader inside an organization or a member of an organization that has set for itself the goal of overturning an entire world social system that is responsible for the horrible oppression, exploitation, despair that has been imposed upon the world. That's the task that you have volunteered to take on. It's obviously a task that's bigger than any of us as individuals. And so there are going to be times of criticism and self-criticism, and sometimes you are going to be criticized, and you are going to feel that you shouldn't have been criticized, and sometimes you may be right. But the party is always right. And by what I mean by that is even when we make an error in criticizing you, the party is right because the criticism is based on the struggle to change the world and to do everything that we can to get our people out of this misery. So sometimes we suck it up, and when necessary, we do the self-criticism, we learn from the experience and how to do what we're supposed to do better. So I'm going to start now on page 3. And the purpose of this pamphlet is to outline our standards for party life. Our goal is to provide a guideline for being a good party member and an example of effective party organization. When we say our standards of party life, we must emphasize that standards set down in the following pages are not limited to party activities or our action and interaction within the party. Every party member must constantly strive to live up to these expectations and enthusiastically do everything necessary for carrying out our struggle for political independence, African unity, and socialism, raising our standard of political education, developing organizing, leadership, and speaking skills, and the ability to analyze and make decisions. This is what we are about. Our everyday thoughts must be about freedom. Revolution is not something to save for a rainy day. If we are to be victorious, which we must breathe the African freedom struggle. Our first thought when we awake in the morning must be African freedom. Our last thought before we go to sleep at night must be African freedom. The thought of freedom should be manifested throughout our daily lives, in our work, our personal lives, in quotes, etc. A true African internationalist understands that total commitment to the struggle is necessary. See, it's not saying that everybody can be in the party. We say a true African internationalist. We say to come into the party is to assume this responsibility for changing the world. Everybody will not do that. Everybody cannot do that for whatever reasons. But we in the African People's Socialist Party voluntarily said this is what it is that we are going to do. A total commitment to the struggle is necessary. A total commitment to the struggle, not to our feelings, etc., but to the struggle. That's what's necessary. To be an African internationalist revolutionary means above all to merge one's own desires and actions with the desires and actions of African liberation. This is a process that we continuously struggle to achieve. In order to effectively lead black people in our struggle for political independence, our party maintains firm links with the masses of our people. Not only do we join and contribute to the different associations organized to benefit the people, but we must also help to organize different committees and associations to deal with specific problems our people are confronted with. And that's what we say the struggle to to make the South Side black again is facing gentrification, people losing their homes, people losing their relationship with each other, people losing connections with their children who no longer have any memory of being associated with the community of African people. This is what this campaign is about. It is, we create different committees and associations. That's what the Keep 28 struggle that we're involved in St. Louis is all about. And similarly, we are on the ground in places around the world, understanding, again, that we organize different committees and associations to deal with specific problems our people are confronted with, depending, of course, on our own capacity. The African People's Socialist Party also uses every opportunity to educate African people to the true nature of the problems confronting us and becomes actively involved with the people in attempting to solve them. In our efforts to educate the people and provide them with the political philosophy of liberation, the African People's Socialist Party attempts to become the telescope through which Africans view the world. Ours is a party that serves the people, not in a reformist or charitable manner, but by attacking the very root causes of the people's problems. Ours is a party that struggles against the causes of African poverty and oppression. We struggle against the cause of police terror and black genocide. To struggle to put political power in the hands of the people is to truly serve black people. And there have been times when members of the party have been infused with certain individuals anyway, sort of petty bourgeois understanding of the people, and assume that we are being with the people because we wear coveralls and unleash boots, then clop around on a regular basis, and that doesn't do it. So whoever does that is working with a caricature of what African working class is all about. And the African working class, generally speaking, wouldn't be caught dead in the kind of attire that these dilettantes who ventured into the African communities to save us would be wearing. The African People's Socialist Party is a revolutionary political party. It is a political party which bases its program on a scientific investigation and analysis of the real concrete problems facing African people. Our party has discovered that the major problem affecting African people is a vicious system of exploitation called imperialism. This system reveals itself as colonialism in its attack on African people, and I could leave it there. Colonialism is used by the imperialists to exploit and oppress foreign workers and nations by violently imposing, maintaining foreign imperialist rule through control of the political power necessary for independent and free decisions. The imperialists, who are an international group of rich and powerful bosses that have stolen from the exploited and oppressed peoples the materials necessary to produce real life, have their political parties also. In the U.S., the parties of the imperialists are the Democrat and Republican parties. I should say the main parties. The primary party of the imperialists are the Democrat and Republican parties. They are not revolutionary parties which work to free the oppressed peoples in the U.S. Instead, both of them are two arms of the same imperialist monster used to keep the people oppressed for the benefit of imperialist profit. The African People's Socialist Party, which is the party of liberation, seeks to free the people from oppression, while the Democrat and Republican parties of the imperialist bosses seek to keep people oppressed. Those who serve the imperialist party serve imperialism, and those who serve the African People's Socialist Party serve African people who suffer from imperialism. The African People's Socialist Party, armed with the powerful teachings of African internationalism, which is summed up in our General Party program, is capable of directing the struggles of our people along the correct line, capable of leading the people to victories while avoiding unnecessary sacrifices. The African People's Socialist Party is a revolutionary party committed to the total liberation of the total destruction of the colonial relationship which binds our people to U.S. imperialist domination. Such a struggle cannot be made haphazardly without a scientific guide to inform our practice. Such a struggle cannot be made without a general strategy. The party's general strategy, which has been widely written about and which appears in pamphlet form under the title Tactics and Strategy for Black Liberation in the U.S., helps us to determine who the friends and enemies of our people are. It helps us to determine which forces contribute materially through their own self-motion to the realization of political independence. The party's strategy also helps us to determine which forces, although incorrect in their direction, are not hostile towards or antagonistically contradictory to our ultimate aims, and which may therefore be worked with. It will also help us to identify those forces which are hostile and which can consciously or objectively serve the forces of imperialism and African colonization. It is from our strategy that we receive the general guidance for all party activities and struggles. A casual glance at the elements of the party strategy will show how it serves our general program and how it informs us in the manner described above. The strategy consists of 7 elements briefly listed above. And this is really important because, we hear people say they're for freedom, for liberation, etc., but that's all. And they just do anything. It's not as though what they do are informed by any kind of strategic objectives. We do have this. We hear all the time how often we hear, increasingly we hear less of this, but how all of us should get together. We are all these different organizations and don't get together, and you can't criticize this because they mean well or something to that effect. And what we say is that, it's been said before, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's not the intentions that we're talking about. We have an objective assessment of what it takes to win. And we will debate that with anybody or any organization. But that has to be the basis of the struggle, not whether we like somebody, not whether all of us should really like each other, or not because they're black too and therefore, etc. What is it that we are about? What is it that they are about? And objectively, what is it going to take to win the liberation of our people and the toiling masses of the world? So we say that we talk about the elements of the strategies that we develop. This document that we are reading from, perhaps it was, I don't have the exact date, but somewhere 84, at least by 84, this was documented. So it's been a while. And part of what we were doing when we wrote this document was also struggling to rescue, to resuscitate the anti-colonial or pro-independent sector of the African liberation that had been wiped out. And so the party of the African working class assumed responsibility to raise that up, to unite the so-called pro-independence or anti-colonial sector, because what had happened with the destruction of this sector of the movement, it was a vacuum that was filled by integrationists and neo-colonial philosophy and politics and organization, part of an effort to make sure that the struggle for liberation never surfaced again, and certainly never surfaced with some kind of scientific approach to making that happen. So this was written in that fashion, to unite and give the pro-independence, the anti-colonial sector of the African Revolution, a capacity to be united in a common struggle with some kind of science to end colonialism. Of course, this was something written by the advanced attachment of the African working class. And what we have always understood is that the struggle for national liberation is one step toward independence, toward genuine freedom. But it is a struggle that can only be successful if it is led by the African working class. And the African working class has to have its own organization capable of fighting in the selfish interest of the class. And that will liberate the entire African nation. And it means that the African working class ascends to power in the post-independent, if you will, situation that we have. What we've seen throughout the African world is that the revolution has been defeated, though not obviously, because there has been the appearance of independence. We had a situation, I'm often referred to the Kenyan strategy by the imperialists, where we had this organization, the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, that's called the Mau Mau, that was a peasant-based mobilization, because it was to take the land. We say peasantry, but it's the working class, taking the land from the British colonizer, who used Kenya in the most horrific kinds of way to bleed, steal the resources from our people. And this was a movement that was led by Dedan Kimathi, who was the field marshal of the Kenyan Land Freedom Army, and had mobilized the people everywhere under the slogan demand of Uhuru. And this is where white people learned to fear the term Uhuru, which is really interesting, because the only thing that Uhuru means is freedom. And if the demand for freedom can strike terror in your heart, that's a hell of a statement about what you are about. And so you had this incredible movement, and the Kenyans finally, after murdering thousands and thousands of African people and perfecting an aspect of a counterinsurgency that actually included moving entire communities behind barbed wire fences to separate them from the revolution, moving them from one territory to the other territory. The whole issue, the counterinsurgency strategy of population and resource control that's being used by the oppressor was really highly developed in the struggle in Kenya. And so what they did was they crushed the revolutionary forces. They killed Dedan Kimathi and thousands of Africans who were part of Mau Mau, which meant that they were Africans who were not tied to British colonialism, were either killed or brought into captivity. And when they did this, they released this guy who we can only call something like a civil rights person, Jomo Kenyatta. They claimed Jomo Kenyatta to have been the leader of the Mau Mau, which is something that he never denied, he never said yes, because he used the struggle of the peasants and workers as leverage in his bargaining. And this is what the petty bourgeoisie usually end up doing. Even when they say they are engaged in armed struggle, it's armed negotiations that they really are involved in. So they use the strength and anger and resistance of the masses in order to gain leverage at a negotiating table with the oppressor. And so they killed off the revolutionaries and they raised up Jomo Kenyatta. They went and actually took him out of prison, gave him a constitution and made him like the president of Kenya. So that's a typical strategy that's being used against us. And it's something that we are faced with even today in much of the world and inside this country. That's how Barack Hussein Obama could appear to be so significant, or Jesse Jackson, or could be significant, or Al Sharpton. And I don't care how much you like any of those persons I just mentioned. The fact is that they became substitutes for the revolution. White power killed Malcolm. White power killed King. White power killed and jailed Panthers all over this country, and then gave us these substitutes, these white power in blackface, and put them in positions of power throughout this country. And most of the struggle that's being waged in this country today, in the United States, I should say, is being waged through the electoral process by sectors of the African petty bourgeoisie who are quicker to denounce revolution than even the white ruling class, who are quicker to denounce the demand for reparations even than the white ruling class. They serve that purpose. And so we have to have some strategy to understand what our interests are. So when we identify what our interests are, we also, excuse me, are able to identify, and only then can we say when somebody's working against them. If you don't know what the hell your interests are, how can you say somebody's working against your interests? You based it instead on whether they can make a good speech, or whether they look good, or something else that has no relationship to what we are about. So we say our first and most important objective for the liberation of our people should be to win black people to the position of political independence. That's the first thing that obviously has to happen. African masses must be won to the position of political independence. That says something about all of the propaganda and all of the work that we do. If the masses of black people are not won over to the position of independence, there will be no independence for black people. It is as simple and clear as that. Most of the party's campaigns have been carried out with this objective in mind. So the objective all the time is to win the people to independence. That's to say, to identify colonialism as the contradiction, not some racism, not some nonsense about helping people to understand that Black Lives Matter. The people must be won to independence if we are to achieve political independence. And if you don't want independence, you're ill. If you're an Africanist or a traitor or something else, and there's no other way to put it. Confused, which is another way of saying ill. But the fact is, independence has to be your objective. Two, a second and related strategic objective for winning liberation is to establish the leadership of the pro-independence movement. And this is something that I think that we worked for a long time and have relatively effectively done that, but except increasingly what we have done also is to create the pro-independence movement in different manifestations, through different types of organizations, through different types of committees and projects that we're involved in to help galvanize people for the purpose of independence. We say that this objective is important for many reasons, but one primary reason is the need to permeate our oppressed colonized communities throughout the U.S., and this is throughout Africa and every place. Because as I talked about the Kenyan solution, that's something that's applied all over Africa as well. I mean, the ANC in power is an evidence of this. And I mentioned the ANC because the African working class party had not been effectively developed in South Africa, despite the fact there were forces that we worked with and had a tremendous amount of unity with, and from whom we learned some things. But it had not developed. It had not developed even a competence of identifying the class struggle, so that the struggle of getting the white people gone was primary and only the fundamental thing. So even today, with the ANC being an organization of millionaires, a leadership of millionaires at minimum, and responsible for carrying out some of the worst offenses against the African working class, they still have not been identified as a petty bourgeois neo-colonial entity, and except by the African People's Socialist Party that's working there. And this is the process of developing, again, an understanding and tactics and strategy for liberation helps us to do that. So we say that, the objective is important for many reasons, but one primary reason is the need to permeate our oppressed colonized communities with the spirit of independence through self-liberation. In doing this, we will be building mass movements and influencing the movements which already exist. As the party will be a small minority party for much of its existence, it is absolutely necessary that the general movement for independence through self-liberation be recognized as the general leadership of the people. The party's revolutionary leadership of the people will often be exercised and recognized through these mass organizations and groups, as well as through the many programs and activities initiated by the party in our own name. So sometimes the party will not be obvious to people, but you know African internationalism when you hear it. And sometimes you will hear it or some expressions of it after it's been hijacked by somebody for their own, but that's what it means to be the advanced attachment. It means that everybody understands the significance of what it is that you just said, this program that you've just created, this strategy that you've just organized around. They understand the significance of it, but they also understand they are not about to become a member or under the leadership of the African working class, and they're not looking for revolutionary conclusions, but they will try and take this language and these projects, et cetera, to mislead the people. That happens. We see that happening right now. 3, another strategic objective for winning independence, and I have to escalate, which should guide our work, is to win support for the independence position within current U.S. borders. The main target for this effort to win support for the independence position should be the general anti-imperialist forces within current U.S. borders, whatever that is, and other oppressed, subject, and colonized nationalities and progressive U.S. North Americans. The party's pursuit of this objective has contributed to the creation of a North American Solidarity Committee and the various committees which work under its leadership. It has also contributed to our continuous attempts to deepen our relationship with the native people, Puerto Ricans, and various other oppressed, subject, and colonized nationalities. I think it's important to say this because, because people will pick out a particular thing that you're doing and use that as the basis of raising some kind of criticism. They say, well, what are them white people? I saw some white people at the meeting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they would take this out of, there's no context for it because they're not dealing with it within the context of a liberation of the people, and therefore what strategic objectives have to be achieved to make that happen. That's what we do as the African People's Socialist Party. We don't run from any relationship that we've created because we can say what it is, why it is, and it's a principled explanation for that relationship. When you have people with relationships who they have to hide, whether they're pretending to be some kind of mass peace movement or not, they lead the people. They can't say that I'm really the party of, what do they call it, peace and liberation and socialism. They can't say that. They can't say that. And they bring people into a trajectory that's defined by the interests of that particular organization. We tell everybody that we are the African People's Socialist Party. We are the International People's Democratic Movement. We are the African National Women's Organization. We are also Black Power Blueprint. We are also all of these things, and we are also members, and I believe a key member of the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And when we say that, we give ammunition to all those people who are opposed to the actual liberation of African people because they recognize the African working class is playing a fundamental role here that gives them the ability to boycott, whether officially, formally, or not, so that they can have huge activities and everybody can come to those activities because they've hidden who the real leadership is, and you have Africans and Mexicans and Palestinians and other white people, every time they say we're going to do something, you see this mass outpourings of people because they identify with the issue. When it comes to us, and when it comes to Black is Back, because of the association of the party and the African working class and our intent to make a revolution that will liberate African people here and around the world, and that's not something any of the peace forces are involved in, including most of the Negroes who are associated with those mass organizations of the white people. And so they won't promote it. They boycott it. And even if they don't do it officially, they will do it unofficially, because you don't see a promotion of what it is that the Black is Back coalition is going to do, precisely because of that. So we say that the African People's Solidarity Committee represents part of its existence, has to do with the strategic objective of winning the support for independence. You won't hear forces in the Solidarity movement trying to run out and get anybody to integrate, to be this and that, or fighting against racism, fight for political independence, fight against colonialism. That's what has to happen, and every day, this is something that's been taken out throughout the white world. It's happening now in Australia. We'll be in South Africa with this movement in the near future. I'm part of a tour that has, that has already gone in the last several days to St. Louis, St. Petersburg, Florida, Gainesville, Florida, has gone to Huntsville, Alabama, has gone to New York, has gone to Boston. We'll be going on tomorrow to Portland, Oregon, and after that to Seattle, Washington, and these are important meetings. That's organized, it's now days and reparations for African people, organized by solidarity forces, white people who are taking the word out and building the ideological and political understanding of what this struggle is all about, and actively and consciously combating the notion that we are fighting against racism or fighting to get white people to like us. That's another thing about us, though, is that we don't just have a plan, we operate a plan. We don't just have a position, we actualize and operationalize the position. Another element of the party's general strategy, this is for the liberation, is to create the creation of dual or competing or contending governmental powers. That is to say, to the degree possible, the party and the general pro-independence movement must assume the real and actual responsibilities of government for our people. That is to say, every oppressed, colonized African community must be made impossible to administer by the U.S. colonial government and any of its agencies. Every oppressed, colonized African community must be transformed into fighting Soviets or councils for African liberation, political independence, and socialism. And this is really important. This statement, this position is so important because suddenly you find a lot of, or more and more Africans, organizations who are discovering the concept of dual power. And they call it dual power just because they have a plan to do something. But this is dual and contending power. It is dual and contending power. Having a barbecue stand in Mississippi is not dual power. It is a barbecue stand in Mississippi. But to have a program that is associated and connected, directly connected to the liberation of our people, that is what dual power is about. And we say here, so if we can realize this objective, we will have plunged a wooden stake into the heart of the imperialist, blood-sucking vampire of the world. For it is not only true that U.S. bourgeois democracy, which is capable of being so defined because of its ability to obscure its class dictatorship, cannot exist in the face of such rejection, but to the degree we can effectively build competing state power, we actually negate the power of the U.S. North American state. We don't have mock grand juries. We don't have mock tribunals. No, the mock grand jury is the one that the colonial power does. The mock tribunal and court is the one that the colonial powers do. Ours are real, and the only missing element at this point is that aspect of state power that will allow us to carry out the verdicts that we come up with. But the fact is that to do this is to confer upon ourselves the responsibility and a contention with the state power of the bourgeoisie, the colonial bourgeoisie. 5, another objective of the party's general strategy is to expose the oppressive nature of the U.S. government, thereby constantly undermining it within and without the current U.S. borders. This is what our propaganda should always be doing. We want to expose the oppressive nature of the U.S. government. We are constantly involved in doing that. And the U.S. government must be exposed as an imperialist danger to the entire world, a danger which practices colonialism within its own borders in Puerto Rico, and which is engaged in unremitting, though generally unrecognized, class war against the U.S. North American people and all workers. So we're constantly involved in exposing the nature of this system, and here and around the world. I mean, that's one of the reasons I've gone to Moscow at least twice, and I'll go a third and a fourth time, despite what they're talking about, the Russian plot. And I'll go any place around the world where we can win an understanding of what the United States government is and the plight of African and oppressed and exploited people here and every place else. And this is something that the U.S. government is worried about. And that's why they have put forth this whole idea, alerting the people, the white people and others in this country, in the U.S. in particular, that there's this devious plot by the Russians to destroy our quote-unquote democracy and create divisions among our people. And this is a plot that's being carried out over social media. So if you see anything on social media that talks about the oppression and exploitation of Africans and Mexicans and indigenous people here, it's the Russians who are doing that, and they're trying to cause you to be divided. This is something they've already laid out. So it's a preemptive strike against the capacity of the people to complain about the nature of this system and to the rest of the world. In the 1960s, this caused a real problem for the U.S. government, but this is the time when the Soviet Union did exist, and China functioned as a revolutionary force in the world. And what that meant was that the U.S. was losing the ideological battle that was being waged by it and imperialist white power throughout the world. So you got people who are in Africa, Asia, South America, and other places who now seeing all this stuff that the U.S. is doing to Africans and other people, what the colonizing powers are doing on the continent of Africa. They see all of this stuff, and then they see here Russia or China saying that they are opposed to this and there's a possible for a new kind of world and society. This was a real problem for the United States. So because peoples around the world would then look to choose other social systems as opposed to this social system that has its origin in slavery and colonialism. The party's general strategy, point 6, also calls for winning international support for our independence position, thereby contributing to the international diplomatic encirclement of the U.S. And to some extent, that's kind of sort of happening. But it's more than, it's a diplomatic encirclement, it's a concentric, I think it's the term that you use, circles, because it certainly is a encirclement of the United States. It's exposing itself more and more around the world. You can see that happening, but you also see it happening as it relates to Europe and many other forces around the world. So the United States is involved, is being exposed to Europe and everybody else, to people in Europe and everybody else, and then the European colonial project is being increasingly exposed to other peoples around the world as well. So all progressive peoples and countries of the world are in unity with the aspirations of colonized people to win our independence. This fact makes it necessary for even the U.S., which is the chief prop for the reactionary and colonial powers in the world, to pay lip service to the aspirations of the people for independence. Of course, that's not true today. In fact, it was the success of this movement. When I say this, I mean for independence that was happening around the world. The struggle against imperialist white power, which was feeding struggle everywhere, all over South America, all over the world. People were rising up. And the U.S. was on the back foot around the world. People were, similarly to now, talking about the decline in U.S. authority, U.S. power. And what happened was Ronald Wilson Reagan was the Trump, if you will, of his era. His project was to make America great again, was to push back the revolutionary struggle that's happening everywhere. And his what do you call a foreign minister in the United States? Secretary of State was, he made Secretary of State a general. Alexander Haig became the Secretary of State General under the Reagan administration. And the first declaration that came out of his mouth when he accepted his post was that, and this was at a time when the U.S. was trying to push back revolutionary struggle in Nicaragua and El Salvador in particular, and he made the statement that henceforth these will not be known as freedom fighters, but they will be known as terrorists. This is Haig did this, and I was in Nicaragua actually when he made this statement. And so now what they want, and then they created a list of terrorists, and anybody who supported these terrorists and terrorist organizations would yourself be jailed, so that you could not give open support to the people of Nicaragua. You could not give open support to the people who are being bombed and murdered in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip. You could not give support to revolutionary people in the Philippines and other places, because the United States put them on a terrorist list, and to give support to them made you a supporter of terrorism and therefore subject to be imprisoned. So this is what the U.S. succeeded in doing. And this is something that you hear used as justification, murdering people all over the world, from the murder that the Nigerian government just did a week or so ago against a sector of the population, fighting against this so-called terrorism. The murder, even you hear even so-called progressive and so-called revolutionary, well, certainly progressive states, using this thing about the war against terrorism as the basis. And of course, terrorism, the concept of terrorism, is such an amorphous, ambiguous kind of unscientific statement that anybody who you want to be a terrorist can be characterized as a terrorist. And as all of us know, terrorism is anything that scares white people, which is why there are guns and police and in our community and children being murdered by the United States government, and why a white jury will free them in every instance for killing us, because they are afraid of us. And they're afraid of us because we are the colonized, and they recognize instinctively that they are the colonizer and that they have to protect this relationship. That's why a 12-year-old child can be shot in a park, in a playground, with having a play gun within 2 seconds of a cop getting there. Because of quote-unquote terrorism. So all of this terrorism is out there. And it's not something that was done accidentally. And that's why Trump can mobilize all the white people in this country, because Mexicans and Hondurans and other people, they say, are marching toward the southern border that was created by the people who stole and took this land from them. The government that's responsible for overthrowing other governments throughout Honduras that will drive the people into deep despair. And so they're supposedly coming toward the border of the United States, and Trump can mobilize all the white people because they're scared. And they are scared because they will lose everything they've got. And they should lose everything they got that It comes as a consequence of taking it from these people who are coming to the border. I am way behind. The seventh element of our general strategy calls for the building of an African People's Liberation Army. These are the elements of the party's general strategy, which is one of the major documents which supplements the general party program. They are laid out in greater detail and with a rational explanation and scientific basis in the party's pamphlet, Tactics and Strategy for Black Liberation. All party members should have a copy of this pamphlet and study it thoroughly for a better understanding of each of the 7 elements of the party's general strategy. So you can see that having a strategic approach to struggle, it makes sense. This is the general strategy that we are employing. And this is, if you look at our work, you will see the elements of this strategy in virtually everything that we do all the time. The party's general strategy, along with our general program, arms party members with the ongoing basis for explaining the aims and methods of struggle to our people. It is a very serious component of the party's strong organization, for without a general strategy that is reflected in a program, not only would we be unable to provide the people with leadership through all the twists and turns of the struggle, not only would we be unable to explain the aims and methods of the struggle to our people, but we too would be rudderless, simply floundering around without any direction. Therefore, it should be clear that a genuine revolutionary party will be guided by a general strategy and program. Indeed, the presence of such a strategy and program is one of the factors which distinguishes the African People's Socialist Party as a real revolutionary party and differentiates it from the various sects which poses as parties. Again, on the bottom of page 6, I have to really expedite this process, don't I? An important factor leading to the absolute need for a party program is the need to win the majority of African people to the revolution and to the party. However, this cannot be done by a program alone. A program and the leadership of the advanced element of the people organized into a revolutionary party is extremely important, but this is not enough to convince the majority of people that revolution is necessary and that membership in the African People's Socialist Party, the only party capable of leading the revolution, is also necessary. The African People's Socialist Party can only do this by becoming the trusted vanguard, the beloved organizer, and leader of the struggle of our class and our people. Agitation and propaganda alone are not enough. Something more is needed to convince the masses of our people of the need for the revolutionary overthrow of U.S. domestic colonialism. In order for this to happen, the people must be schooled through their own struggles under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. The oppressed, colonized African people learn through their own experiences that only through stubborn struggle can they snatch any meaningful concessions from the capitalist colonialist ruling class. They learn the nature of bourgeois or ruling class democracy and colonialist dictatorship of the whole African people. They learn the relationship of classes and the differences in the class struggle occurring between the primary classes within the U.S. North American society and the struggle of black people for political independence through self-liberation. In other words, African people, through their own experiences, learn that we have, and this statement written, the one I just, they learn the relationship of classes and the difference in the class struggle occurring between the primary classes within the U.S. North American society and the struggle of black people for political independence through self-liberation. It's a statement that tries to say something about the fact that they learn the difference in the struggle that's happening between white people, among white people. That's called class struggle, where people fighting sectors of the population engage in struggle for advantage in their own defined interests. and the struggle of the colonized people who are fighting against all of that, which is the colonial struggle, and where we say the real class question is concentrated. And everybody who's genuinely opposed to capitalism, no white person opposed to capitalism can say that they're fighting for capitalism because they're trying to free the white workers or liberate the white women or homosexuals or anything like that. It doesn't work like that. Because if you really are opposed to capitalism, then what you do is you unite with the deadly enemy of capitalism, the most defining struggle that will bring the whole thing down, which is the African Revolution, the struggle for African liberation, which is the struggle with the Mexican people. You don't talk about how Trump is bad because he says bad things about the border. You unite with the Mexicans that the border is something that was created at their expense, that the land was stolen in the first place. You don't sympathize with the fact that there are people living in concentration camps called Indian reservations where they don't have electricity and running water. You unite with the aims and aspirations of the people to take back everything that's been taken from them. But the imperialism has given white people a stake in the preservation of the same system, because this is where your house is, this is where everything you have come from, and this is why everybody else can be a terrorist, because everybody else wants what belongs to us, which is our total liberation and the ability to feed, clothe, house ourselves, and to guarantee a future for our children. And the future of our children is being taken away from us by these damn borders that white people have set up, whether it's here, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's the artificial borders created on the continent of Africa that separates African people from ourselves and resources. Imperialist white power did that as a part of the process of becoming imperialist white power, the social system coming into existence. And so white people can join the rest of human beings by uniting with this struggle to bring the whole damn thing down. Then you don't have to be scared of me no more. Right? You got all of this power in numbers, et cetera, that can bring it down and create the new world that we are looking for. In other words, the African people, through their own experience, learned that we have class enemies who attack and exploit us as working people, but whose primary attack on our people stem from our powerlessness as a whole people, being subject and colonized. They learn the role of the puppets and henchmen of our class and national enemies. They learn the role of the reformist leaders of pacifist collaborating black organizations. They learn there's only one way out of the imposed misery, the police murders in the streets, the massive unemployment and humiliation of our whole people, the way of a revolutionary struggle for political independence through self-liberation, the way of successful struggle to throw off our colonial masters and the assumption of power over our own lives. This is what the people learn and can learn through their own experiences. These experiences of our oppressed and colonized people will be learned in the day-to-day struggles for decent housing, freedom of speech and assembly, jobs, and economic security, and end to the massive black prison population, free daycare for our children, a decent and liberating education, etc. The masses will learn who their enemies are through these struggles. They will see the cops with their guns and clubs come out to protect the slumlords during tenant strikes. They will see the National Guard come out with tanks, gas, and automatic weapons to put down rebellions in our colonized communities. They will see vicious politicians break promise after promise. The people will also recognize, they will see this, but they will understand it as a consequence of the intervention of the advanced attachment. Because the people will not come to revolutionary conclusions on their own. They can come to a conclusion about rebelling, about rising up, by striking, by doing this and that, but it's the party's responsibility to take revolutionary science into these struggles so that rebellions and uprisings and things like that can come to revolutionary conclusions. They're not just this unending series of rebellions and rebellions and rebellions that get put down, clubbed to death by the state, and the people not learning lessons from that and therefore becoming discouraged even from rebelling. Because there's at least, if the people are armed with an understanding of what the fight is about, even if we lose from time to time, it won't have appeared to the people as some senseless, just some directionless, just something that we did that didn't have any consequences. The people will also recognize the other weapons of the capitalist colonialist ruling class for what they are. They will see the poisonous anti-black venom printed in the bourgeois media. They will see forces like the Nazis and Ku Klux Klan attack the people in order to stifle our righteous struggle to better our condition and throw off our foreign and alien bosses. African people learn through their own experiences that we must have a revolutionary party which leads us in our struggle, which draws the correct conclusions from the struggle, and which in the preparation for and in the midst of the struggles continuously exposes every move of the enemy and teaches the working class masses the lessons which could be learned from their struggles. The African People's Socialist Party, part and parcel of the laboring African masses, has only one interest: a better life for our colonized African people and an end to human exploitation. And I think that's what we must always keep in mind. That's what our interest is. And so we talk about revolution, but revolution is not, okay, let's go out and make a revolution. We talk about revolution because the exploitation and oppression of our people is real, because there's a foreign and colonial capitalist power that stands between our people and happiness, between our people and the ability to have a decent life, where having access to the process and materials that will give us a better material life on earth. That's what this party is about. And so when we talk about revolution, it's simply because of recognition that this is not something that's going to happen accidentally. Some people in the past, and there are even those now, who are convinced that what happens to us as a people is because our rulers don't quite understand what we really need, what we really want, or we haven't really learned to say it the right way, or we don't know how to play the game, or some other silliness like this. That's what some people actually believe. Some people believe that if we say a prayer for the leaders, if we say a prayer for ourselves, that somehow this is going to change our circumstances. But the party knows better. And the party takes this understanding to the masses of our people. And we even go into these institutions, religious and otherwise, that's used against us in most instances to convince the people. So while the African People's Socialist Party knows that hunger, genocide, and misery cannot be finally abolished under the capitalist colonial system, it leads and organizes the fight of the masses for better conditions now, because the interests of the impoverished laboring masses are its interests, and because it knows that these day-to-day struggles heighten the fighting capacity of the masses and develop the people for their final task, the overthrow of the capitalist colonial system. There's some people in our party make the mistake in saying that we do not demonstrate, we do not organize people around this or that question because our objective is to, because that does not relate in their mind to the what end, to the capturing of political power. But the people have to be, we have to participate. When the people want to struggle, and even if the people haven't thought of struggle, the party has to be able to intervene, because this is what raises the fighting capacity of the people. The people must learn that it's correct to fight, to resist, to engage in struggle, and the party has to be there and has to provide the leadership for that, and that enhances the ability of the people to fight. It is true that the people do not need the party to lead a demonstration or lead a protest, because the people can do that. They can lead a protest, but the people need the party for the science, for revolutionary science that takes them beyond this protest that we're involved in front of the police station, or beyond what kind of rebellion that happens. We need to be there in the mix and explaining every step of the way what the objectives of the actions are. So we say, while the African People's Social, we say that the membership of the African People's Socialist Party consists of the most advanced segment of the general African population. These are people whose social and political consciousness have placed them at the disposal of African people through their organized, disciplined involvement in the struggle for national liberation. I want to say that again. These are people, talking about the members of the party, these are people whose social and political consciousness have placed them at the disposal of African people through their organized, disciplined involvement in the struggle for national liberation. African People's Socialist Party members are people who have voluntarily agreed to adhere to the strict discipline of the African People's Socialist Party based on their agreement with the party's program and their understanding of our need for a party that is united in action. A person who comes into the African People's Socialist Party must abandon all the selfish individualism promoted by the ruling class colonial bosses and become a member of the African People's Socialist Party National Liberation Offensive, where all personal and individual interests are subordinated to the interests of African people as represented by the African People's Socialist Party. The solidarity of members of the African People's Socialist Party is not based on feelings, beliefs, personal friendships, etc. The solidarity of members of the African People's Socialist Party is not based on feelings, beliefs, personal friendships, etc. The unity of the members of our party is based on the decision by members to unselfishly serve the cause of African liberation through active and conscious application of the scientific principles of African internationalism. And one of the scientific principles of African internationalism, by the way, is democratic centralism, is the form of the party that we, through which we carry out our mission. It is a great thing to become a member of the African People's Socialist Party, to join with the millions of African and other oppressed peoples throughout the world on this historic march to freedom and human dignity. That's what we are about. This is who we are as a party. We are not individuals who are just involved in our personal comfort. When I say comfort, I'm not just talking about physical comfort. I'm talking about emotional comfort. I'm talking about all those things that we have to overcome in order to get to our freedom, because even the bourgeoisie and the society that we live in help to forge our emotional responses to the reality that we are confronted with. That's why there is not an adequate emotional response, generally speaking. That's why drugs, alcohol, and all this other kinds of thing are heaped on the community to misinform, disinform, if you will. And so it is the responsibility of the party to deal with that differently. So the solidarity, we said that it is a great thing to become a member of the party, a member of the African People's Socialist Party, to join with the millions of Africans and other oppressed peoples throughout the world on this historic march to freedom and human dignity. Such a great march demands real discipline and unity from all party members. Everybody's not going to be able to do this, comrades. Even people in our ranks, they think they knew what they were joining when they came to the party because there's some romance to it, because y'all look good and stuff like that. But everybody's not going to be able to do this. It's our ability, even as leaders of this party, to struggle against self. Because we are products of this oppressive kind of system also. It teaches us how to respond to its oppression. And it does not train and teach us to respond through organizing a revolution to overturn it. It trains us to go in other kinds of direction that takes us from revolution, that takes us into some self-serving personal direction, as opposed to the direction that's going to liberate our people and the masses of people around the world. That's why we're talking about standards of party life now, because it takes a certain kind of organization of the oppressed to get us out of the situation, and it takes us relearning what it is to be a real human being, as opposed to some self-absorbed, whining individual whose own comfort is the thing that informs what it is that we do. We have to have the ability to see the world, to see the future, and to see ourselves as capable and willing to do whatever is necessary to win the liberation of our people and the emancipation of the human beings from this social system that's based on slavery and based on colonialism. Because you can solve or struggle to solve your own individual and personal problem. It won't do a damn thing to overturn colonialism, to overturn capitalism, and to make your mama and your relatives and everybody else free from this, and to be able to say that our children will have a decent future. So you can either be bogged down in dealing with that kind of stuff, or you can join with the revolutionary project and make this, like I said, even emotional sacrifices, emotional struggle, because emotional discipline is something else that we are engaged in attempting to achieve. Because the bourgeoisie teaches us to be emotionally indisciplined. You know, it does. You know, but you can watch even this thing that's happening in the United States government, the Trump administration. You see Trump, attacking all of these forces that's a part of represent the bourgeoisie that's in his own administration. And you see them being cool because they represent a certain sector of capital. Their job is to stay there and make the interests of capital something that prevails. Despite all of the digging that Trump may be doing, they function like cadre. They function like bourgeois cadre because they have tasks that they have to achieve in the interest of the bourgeoisie. We can do no less than that. So we say, such a great march demands real discipline and unity of action from all party members. Members of the African People's Socialist Party, which is the most advanced and courageous segment of the African colony, willingly and zealously make the sacrifices demanded by our great task. One of the first guidelines in our standards of party life is the acceptance and understanding of the theory of African internationalism. It is only with full understanding and acceptance of our theory and ideology that we can develop the foresightedness or farsightedness and patience necessary to make us into totally committed African freedom fighters. Education provided through party literature, political education classes, and accompanying suggested readings, the Brenning Spear, aids us in understanding our theory, history, present conditions, thus giving us proper and practical information to allow us the ability to make correct analysis of ours and other people's struggles domestically and internationally. Therefore, education, that of self-education, and that which is provided by the party is an essential part of party life and is a daily task that an African internationalist must carry out. And I don't know how many of us understand this and struggle constantly. I study all the time. I'm constantly engaged in trying to improve my understanding of the world. Education, self-education, the education that's provided by the party. And the party provides a tremendous amount of education. If you just go back and start reading political reports to our Congresses, if you read the Brenning Spear on a daily basis, if you study the 14-point platform of the African People's Socialist Party, you can go any place in the world and function as a revolutionary force. A second guideline to our standard of party life is a total submission of our party to our party constitution. Let me say something, comrades. I know I'm affecting the ability to get through this, but I think it's something that every member of the party and every non-party person and every person who is aware of this, because when we say that we had advanced attachment, it's a really important statement that we need to be able ourselves to accept. To just say it is one thing. But we need to, that means a tremendous amount of responsibility that we have voluntarily taken on. And it's important for the masses also to understand that we are the advanced attachment and what it means to say we are the advanced attachment. The people must also recognize that this leadership is here. And one of the things that gives us this ability, we just came out of this incredible 7th Congress of our party. And this 7th Congress happened something like 46 years after the founding of the African People's Socialist Party. Some 46 years after our founding. That's incredible. And the African People's Socialist Party itself was born of a trajectory that comes from the 1960s, from Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and then SNCC, and then JOMO, and then from JOMO, JOMO becomes one of the 3 critical forces that organized the African People's Socialist Party in 1972. So there were all kinds of forces around during this period, but they are not here now. And that's a critical thing to understand, that there are people who I knew and worked with in the 1960s who are still alive. They may even be active. They may call themselves militants and revolutionaries, but ours is the only revolutionary party that has existed from that period. We never surrendered. We never gave up, despite whatever difficulties that were out there, and we learned from all these experiences in a single organization. This organization is one that has been developed, defined by all the struggles that we had to go through, all the problems that we had to solve for the revolution. We didn't just wake up one day and come up with a program. We came up with a program that was contextualized by the ongoing struggle to complete this revolutionary project that we've been on for 46 years. And that's something that's really important for us to understand, because there are tremendous the lessons of the whole African liberation movement that the African people have been involved in, that includes on the continent of Africa and every place else. Those lessons are concentrated in the African People's Socialist Party, in the political reports that we do, in the basic party line. It's concentrated in the 14-point platform. It's concentrated in various other manifestations that we're talking about. This is who we are. And it's really important for everybody to understand this, because you may have just got here, but we've been here for a while. The party has been here, and you jumped onto a process that's already in motion. And you have to unite with this incredible history and appreciate the history, the sacrifices, the struggles that's been involved, not just by members of the party, but by African people and revolutionaries around the world. We were here when Che was murdered in Bolivia. We summed that up. We were here when the Vietnamese carried the whole oppressed world on its own shoulders by itself. We were part of that process. We were here. And I was in Nicaragua shortly after the Nicaraguan Revolution. That has become a part of who we are. It has helped to define us and give us the identity that we have now. So it's not just something we popped up, or that we used to be in the movement in a group this time, and then last year we joined this group, and this year we joined this group. The party is the only force that has this incredible history, this incredible continuum, where all of the lessons of the revolution for the last 50 years are concentrated in this organization. That's your organization. That's your responsibility to carry out this mission. So we say a second guideline of our standard of party life is the total submission to our party constitution. The Constitution provides us with basic guidelines in the functioning of the whole party, setting restrictions, regulations, and rewards, which are vitally necessary for the effective functioning of the party as a whole. The party constitution provides for a party united by specific principles and objectives. The party constitution provides for a party unified by specific principles and objectives. So it's not just the whims of individuals at any given moment that says, this is who we are, this is what we do. We got a constitution there. And one of the most important things about a constitution is the limitation that it places on leaders. So, you just can't have somebody pop up and say, this is, et cetera, et cetera. It violates the Constitution. It violates the basic principles of the party that's laid out concretely. That's why you can pick up our newspaper every month, and then you can see what the rules of party discipline are. They're not just for us. It arms the people to be able to measure our performance, what it is that we're doing out there in the world. This is the African People's Socialist Party, and this is why we do what we do. So we say total submission to our party constitution is necessary in order to provide the cohesion necessary to maintain a democratic centralist party, a party which provides for democracy under centralized leadership. It also keeps us free of dishonest and disruptive elements. Central to this, the most important criterion of loyalty to our party and African freedom is the active fight for party policy. In order to achieve this, it is an absolute responsibility of party members to take part in discussions of party policy, be involved in self-criticism and criticism, and adhere to the rules of party discipline. In doing so, education plays a very instrumental part in that it allows for an educated membership capable of intelligently fighting for party policy. And everybody who calls herself a leader should really recognize the significance of political education of the membership, because a politically educated membership is what makes a leadership capable of doing what it has to do, and it makes it unnecessary for the leadership to carry on everything, do everything, say everything, write everything, etc. We got a membership now that is competent, that becomes increasingly capable of assuming responsibility for the whole program of the African People's Socialist Party.
Party members, African internationalists must adhere to party democratic centralism. Centralism means that our party has one program and unified rules. Democracy is the ability to vote on party policy and leadership. We just had a Congress where everybody in the party from around the world was able to participate in the discussion of the program of the party for the next 5 years and to vote on whether it's acceptable or not, to elect the leaders of our party, the leaders of our party in South Africa, the leaders of our party in Kenya, the leaders of our party in Europe, the leaders of our party in the United States. This is what was possible through this Congress. This is a democratic thing. And then after having united on the program, united on the political report, and then elected the leaders were elected to be able to carry out that program that we just voted on and to demand discipline from all of the membership in the process of carrying that out. That's what democratic centralism represents in the real world. So we say party members, African International, must adhere to party democratic centralism. Centralism means that our party has one program and unified rules. Democracy is the ability to vote on party policy and leadership. An important element of democratic centralism and party discipline is the unconditional subordination of the minority to the majority and of lower party organizations to the higher ones. A party member uses criticism and self-criticism only as a constructive means of correcting errors in order to strengthen the party. We don't just engage in criticism. The purpose of criticism is to strengthen the party. Yet you will hear from time to time members of the party who will engage in criticism that I consider rather reckless because it has nothing to do with strengthening the party. It has something to do with some gripe that they might have as an individual, some slight that they might have assumed occurred to them as individual. But when it comes to fighting for the party, that's why I say the party can make mistakes, but the party is always right. And by that I mean, even when we make a mistake, even when we engage in criticism and self-criticism, the basis of the criticism and the self-criticism is to promote the revolution, is to fix the party, to make the party most effective for carrying out the revolutionary project. And even in the process of doing that, sometimes the party will make an error, but it makes an error in the process of trying to do that. And that's something that we have to, that means that our unity with the party is paramount. We have to be united with the party. You can't say because the party made a mistake, because I really didn't do that, or I really didn't say that, or I really didn't act that way, therefore I'm going on a rampage or some kind of attack on the party. You can't do that because the party is right. The party is struggling to make the revolution. That's why you came into the party, not to solve some personal issue that you might have, right? You say, never is criticism and self-criticism used as an excuse mechanism, which does not correct but allow occurrence of the same backwards errors in an attempt to pull the party down to the level of the same type of backwardness. An African internationalist must not implement policy mechanically, but with great political maturity. Study never ends, and political growth is infinite. Discipline is also a very important aspect of party life. It is a voluntary process dependent upon your commitment. The process of criticism and self-criticism helps in achieving and maintaining discipline. However, discipline cannot be forced discipline. The responsibility for living up to party discipline is dependent on the individual's commitment to adhere to the general party program and learn from her or his mistakes. The party is a voluntary, self-sustaining organization. Therefore, a third function of party life is the timely payment of membership dues. Everyone who joins the party must regularly pay dues, party dues, thereby providing material aid for the orderly functioning of the party. That's what the dues are for. The dues don't go into somebody's pocket or bank account. It's to make for the orderly function of the party. It is one aspect of self-reliance that the party imposes on itself. Its membership participate in self-reliance by paying dues so the party can do what it's supposed to do. You those who would prefer not to do that, and by not doing that, it's a suggestion that we should get the resources to make the party happen from some imperialist kind of force. We could be like the NAACP, or we could be like the Urban League, or we could be like Jesse Jackal and Al Sharpton, or some other force like that that goes to these other places, like to be funded. But party members pay dues. And the dues really aren't that much, And the only reason we pay the way we do is because we simplified it so that persons wouldn't have to be involved in trying to figure out what portion of somebody's income, that's another task that would have been imposed on forces responsible for a membership. A good party member must be creative, have initiative, innovation, and be flexible enough to meet changing situations. An African internationalist understands his or her historical responsibility to the party in its fight for a free, united, socialist nation of African people. An African internationalist understands his and her historical responsibility to the party in its fight for a free, united, socialist nation of African people. To be an African internationalist is a great thing. It is not for everyone to be. African internationalists are the politically astute people of our dispersed nation, the disciplined soldiers of freedom, the energetic, the selfless fighters, the builders of a new society, the leaders of the African masses. These are the necessary qualities of African internationalists. The party is the leader of the masses. It elaborates the correct political line, defines tasks and directions of the political work of institutions, coordinates their work, and strengthens them with leading personnel. Only the party's leadership is capable of directing the work of struggle against U.S. colonialism and imperialism. And this is a shortcoming that we're really struggling right now to correct in the best way. We say that, again, the party is the leader and teacher of the masses. It elaborates the correct political line, defines tasks and directions of the practical work of institutions, coordinates their work, and strengthens them with leading personnel. This is what the party has to do. And only the party's leadership is capable of directing the work of struggle against U.S. colonialism and imperialism. That's what we try to do. That's why we try to put party forces in these critical institutions that we are responsible for. That's why, we have put people who are supposed to be members of the party, which assumes that they are either cadre or really struggling to become cadre. And we put them in difficult places because they are members of the party. And we put them in some institutions because the institutions need support, direct support from members of the party to be able to succeed. That means people who are willing to make the sacrifice to get up early, stay up late, to come up with different kinds of strategies to make this project succeed. That's why we put a party member in this institution. Do you know what I'm talking about? People in this meeting know what I'm talking about. People here know what I'm talking about. They're members of the African People's Socialist Party that we say we can send them to this project, work in this organization, work in this committee, work in this structure, work in this institution that we've created, because that means that the institution, the committee is going to be much stronger now that we put the party. These are mass institutions, mass organizations. We're talking about even trying to help NPDM function better by making sure that party members in that organization, and not just not just masses alone who don't necessarily have the science and don't have the kind of commitment that we assume that African internationalists would have. So the party must guard against choking the party with unstable elements and unsuitable people. A member of the African People's Socialist Party must have such qualities as theoretical development, knowledge of historical conditions, and the ability to analyze situations and conditions. Party members must be the most advanced sector of the African masses, which pushes forward all other Africans. Now, this is not the same thing as saying that somebody got to come in knowing Garvey, knowing Nkrumah, knowing all this other stuff. But there are often efforts to choke the party with unstable elements. But this is a kind of charity politic, because we say, oh, this person had such a bad time, and this person, was homeless for 7 years, or this person had these kinds of contradictions and mental illness and stuff that's due to colonial oppression, and just bring them into the party. That's a charity politic. That's not what we're about. We're talking making a damn revolution. And to be making a revolution, yes, colonialism drives people into deep mental despair and creates all kinds of problems for the people. But the same colonial system that creates that person turns that person also too often into the one who's going to pull the trigger against a leader of our movement. And we don't know how many times somebody who has been mentally ill has been put into organizations for the purpose of carrying out assassinations and other things, precisely because they don't know what the hell they were doing. So our objective, we can't cure that until the revolution happens. We create the conditions for them to join a movement where part of the cure is located in the fight, but we can't bring them. We can't choke the party with those kinds of forces. And I've seen that from time to time. There are some places where you can see that the party is filled with just those kinds of individuals. And somebody said they've got a real revolutionary organization because it's an organization that's filled with ill people. And unless you intend to create some other kind of institution, and I'm not opposed to that, creating institutions that would deal with mental people and mental illness, but you can't bring them into the party. That's not the institution that's going to do that in that fashion. So I want to try to move this forward. I'm only going to give us a few more minutes before I turn it over to you. I do want to go, however, to page 15. Where we talk about party discipline and freedom of criticism. And because this is important. It says that the free, on page 15, under the subtitle, Party Discipline and Freedom of Criticism, it reads, the free discussion of questions of party policy in individual party organizations or in the party as a whole is the fundamental right and responsibility of every party member as a principal point of party democracy. Only on the basis of internal democracy is it possible to develop African internationalist self-criticism and to strengthen party discipline, which must be conscious and not mechanical. There is complete freedom of discussion in the party unit. There's complete freedom of discussion in the party until a majority decision has been made by the unit or the leading committee, after which discussion must cease and the decision be carried out by every organization and individual member of the party. It is clear, however, the basic principles and decisions, such as, for example, the theory of African internationalism and the program of the African People's Socialist Party cannot be questioned. We cannot imagine a discussion, for example, questioning the correctness of the leading role of the laboring masses in the struggle against colonialism, or the necessity of the leadership of the African independence movement in the struggle for socialism. We do not question the theory of the revolutionary overthrow of colonialism and the total destruction of the imperialist ruling class. We do not question the correctness of the revolutionary theory of the international class struggle as laid down by the theory of African internationalism. We do not question the political correctness of the decisions, resolutions, etc., of the party congresses or the Central Committee after they are ratified. Otherwise, every undercover agent of the capitalist colonialist bourgeoisie and every sympathizer of the ideological imperialists would have an opportunity to continually raise their counter-revolutionary theories in the units, districts, etc., and make the members spend time and energy in discussing such questions, thus not only disrupting the work of the party, but also creating confusion among the less experienced and trained elements of the party. As a matter of fact, this is a favorite tactic of enemies of the party and of the revolution, who are always disrupting and causing confusion in the name of democracy. One of the things that criticism that liberals and anti and counter-revolutionaries make of the party, organization based on democratic centralism, is that you're some kind of dictator, that and there is a dictatorship in the party, but it is a dictatorship of the working class that functions through principles of democratic centralism. But the bourgeoisie, they would say, well, we know that you're like robots, unthinking individuals, because I can ask a member of the African People's Socialist Party a question in South Africa, and then I'll get the same answer in Houston, Texas. So if that's not robot, what it is? And of course, what that is organizational and ideological unity. It's consolidated organization. It's impossible, or it should be impossible, for the bourgeoisie, the white ruling class, even using Negro simpletons and agents and stooges, to break through the ideological and political wall that has been established to protect our organization and protect our revolutionary process. So you can't do that by calling me some kind of dictator or et cetera, because I won't let the petty bourgeoisie come in and destroy our organization. You're damn right. The dictatorship of the proletariat is here. And at minimum, I'm not going to let you do that. Maximally, there's no telling what might happen as a consequence of this confrontation. However, that does not mean that the problems dealt with in such decisions and how best to apply these decisions are not to be clarified in the party organizations by discussion. On the contrary, a most thorough discussion for the purpose of making every party member understand these resolutions and decisions and how to apply them is essential for effective party work. And that's something that we really have to get used to and learn how to do most effectively. How do we arm the people in the organization? How do we help every member understand what it is that we're doing, what policies we are pursuing, what strategy is at work right now? This is the thing that really gives us the strength and power that we need to have as a party. And so those discussions are really important, because what happens with those discussions is that we have people who are united with what we are doing and will fight for it, as opposed to simply stepping in and saying, this is what we're going to do, which may be necessary sometimes. But in carrying out how we're going to carry out the projects that we've established, it really encourages the most serious kinds of discussions within our party organizations to facilitate that. So we say party discipline is based upon African internationalism, the class and national consciousness of its members, upon the conviction that without the minority accepting and carrying out the decisions of the majority, without the subordination of the lower party organizations to the higher committees, there can be no strong, solid, steel party able to lead the poor, impoverished masses. This discipline is based upon the acceptance of the party program and rules of discipline, and in the confidence of the membership of the Central Committee. There can be no discipline in the party if there is no conscious and voluntary submission on the basis of a thorough understanding of the general party program and the decisions of the party. Only conscious discipline can be truly iron discipline. To assist in the discipline of the party, then we created these explicit rules of discipline which people have access to. And I would encourage everybody to spend the time going through this document, and to even in our different committees and what have you, read and study this document. Because where we are now, again, is that the members and individual members of the party become the critical instruments through which we will forward this revolutionary agenda. It is what we talk about when we talk about Vanguard Up, when we talk about the advanced detachment of the African Revolution, the vanguard. We are talking about now individuals having the responsibility to live up to what it is that we have to do to change this world so that our people will know freedom, and that has to be the primary thing that we are involved in, the struggle for the liberation of our people. And no people, any place on the planet Earth, no oppressed people has ever become free without first creating an organization of steel cadre willing to do whatever is necessary to make that freedom happen. There has to be that leading organization. And that's what the African People's Socialist Party is. That's what we volunteered to do, to be the professional revolutionaries who may have all kinds of occupations, but our one profession is revolution, is to end the misery and exploitation and oppression of our people, to do everything possible to advance the struggle for the emancipation of the working peoples, the toiling masses and colonized peoples of the world, to assume our responsibility to create a new world by destroying this vicious social system that changes its face from time to time, changes its character from time to time, but the nature of which remains the same all the time. It is oppressive, it is exploitative, it is parasitic, and it sucks the blood of African and oppressed peoples around the world and the working peoples as well. It must be destroyed. That's our task. Uhuru.
Vanguard, vanguard, we must lead.
African people must be free.
Vanguard, vanguard, we must lead.
African people must be free.
Uhuru. I first want to salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for that powerful study. It is now time to open up with questions from our audience and online viewers. We want to appreciate everyone who's tuning in via Facebook and YouTube, and also appreciate all of your engagement. Please continue to share this study widely. I also wanted to recognize a few salutes that we received on our Facebook live stream. We have Comrade Fred Nguyen from the People's Organization for Progress who tuned in, and he left a comment saying independence has to be objective. We have USM Australia that has tuned in, and they actually listed all of the members who were participating on the live stream.
Right on.
We have Sister Coffee Wright out of St. Louis, who has been watching this whole morning as well. And lastly, we have Brother Carlton Brown, who is the president and ambassador of the Carlton Brown Foundation, Friends of the African Union, based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he also sent a salute.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. So to pick it up with some questions we received, the first one comes from Sister Lisa Davis out of Newark, New Jersey. She asked if you, Chairman, can repeat the point you made about Alexander Hay under the Reagan administration and naming freedom fighters terrorists.
Uhuru, stemming from the 1960s, U.S. imperialism and the imperialist world order was experiencing a real crisis. Revolution was happening all around the world. And it had extended itself, even though the African liberation movement in this country had suffered a major defeat by the end of 1972. It had this counter-revolutionary effort that extended itself throughout the Americas because people were fighting in El Salvador, people were fighting in Nicaragua, even the question of Panama was really important because the people in Panama had taken back the canal from the United States government, and the Reagan administration was an administration that understood the anxiety of white people. And of course, in 1917, but the Reagan administration was experiencing the anxiety of the white people in this country, among other things, among the loss of resources and it mobilized his campaign, political campaign, was to fight against the cowardly, ineffective Carter administration and to make America great again. That's what, more or less, what the Reagan administration was about. And it initiated a brutal war against the people in Nicaragua. I was in Nicaragua in January of 1976. Is that when the Reagan administration, 77, because Reagan was elected in 76. And so the inauguration happened in January of 1977. And I was in Nicaragua when Alexander Haig, who was a general, and you must pay attention to this because we're talking about a Secretary of State. When you see the U.S. government making a Secretary of State the person responsible for the diplomacy of the government, you know, we saw that before. What was the guy's name for whom they named after the Second Imperialist War, who was responsible for, it was a general, whatever this campaign, this process that Marshall, he was a general. And the so-called Marshall Plan, you may have heard about that, where they were going to repair all of Europe. This was the military, U.S. military, in charge of the diplomacy. And they did it with Colin Powell, who was a general, and they did it at this time with Alexander Haig. And Haig ascended to the role of Secretary of State. And his inaugural statement, while the Reagan administration was preparing to attack Nicaragua and to attack the revolution in El Salvador and other places, that because they were confronted with freedom fighters all over the world. Everybody in the world was fighting, and we were characterized as freedom fighters. And so they wanted to take that from us so that they wouldn't be in a situation of saying they are fighting against freedom. So they said that they are no longer going to characterize any of these forces as freedom fighters. They shall now be known as terrorists. And that became official policy of the U.S. government under the administration of Ronald Reagan and the State Department of General Alexander Haig. And that's what we're fighting today. The same concept that people are fighting for freedom are now being characterized as terrorists and terrorism, when the real terrorists are the ones who are able to make such a definition. I hope that helps, Comrade Lisa.
Thank you for that explanation, Chairman. We have a brother named Alfred Powles who we could not get his location, but he left a part comment, part question. It says, I know what you are saying is truth. Malcolm said that we should be voting in a block. Are you saying the same? And then the rest of his comment is, I know we should not be a part of the existing parties. We should have our own party identity that represents and serves our needs. Politicians, particularly Africans, should be working toward ratification of the Constitution and all other legislation that continues to reflect racist policies, laws, statutes, etc. Legally, we're not considered citizens of the U.S. When, where, and how do I sign up?
Well, you may not want to sign up, because what I'm saying is more than that. What I'm saying is that it's impossible for African people to win freedom through the electoral process. The electoral process itself functions as a nonviolent contest between sectors of the ruling class for control of the state to its own profit-making advantage. The elections were not established to overturn the system. It was established to protect the system from people who would be fighting against this system of capitalist and colonial oppression and exploitation. So that's one thing, which is not to say that we will not participate in an election, because we have participated in elections, and we do participate in elections. But our participation in elections function more to expose the contradictions of the system, to advance the interests of African people that the system can't tolerate. The system never has been able to deal with the question of reparations. We run for office, we run for demanding reparations. We run demanding black community control of the police. We run demanding black community control of our schools. We run campaigns and even put measures on the ballot calling for those kinds of things. And in fact, through the coalition, Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, we spent about a year in a process of holding 10 state conventions plus the District of Columbia and a national convention in D.C. To forge a black people's revolutionary national political agenda for self-determination. We say everybody who is going to be running for office in the interest and name of black people need to accept this political program. That includes white people who want our vote, whether they can unite the Democrats or the Republicans. We don't give a damn what they call themselves, Democrats, Republicans, or what have you. The question is whether or not they unite with the program for self-determination of African people. If they can do that, then they can win some kind of vote from us. But we recognize even in doing that, ultimately, that African people are going to have to take our freedom. And that's something that we use the electoral process to educate, pull masses of African people together, undermine the white nationalist social system that's responsible for the enslavement and brutality imposed against masses of the people around the world. And also I want to say that even if it were possible for African people to get some kind of rights in this country through the Democratic, Republican, or the electoral process, who would want it? When they're talking about killing the people who are marching toward the border to get their own stuff, who would want to have citizenship in a country that's responsible for murdering all these people in Yemen today, killing Palestinians, creating these walls up that separate people from their resources, keeping the indigenous population that they call Indians in these concentration camps that they call Indian reservations, keeping half of Mexico that they stole that they now call Texas and California and Utah and Colorado? Who would want that? If you had a choice to have that. And I'm saying I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and I think most Africans, if we were conscious of what it meant, would not touch it anyway. We understand that such a system as this has to be overturned. It has no redeeming value qualities at all. And so we're not fighting to be a part of that. We're fighting to take our own power. We have to become a self-governing people. We are preparing to govern, and that we cannot govern unless we remove this oppressive arm that is responsible for how we live as Africans here and around the world. I know it was a long-winded response, but I hope it was adequate. I hope the comrade still wants to know where to sign up to.
Uhuru, I just wanted to read one more comment. This is not a question, and then go into our announcements. We have a comment from Comrade Nanaya from Philadelphia, who said, imperialism is in crisis. We must strike our blow by organizing the masses of the African working class. And with that, we are ending the Q&A portion of this week's study. Because of time, we want everyone to know that if your question wasn't answered, one of our moderators will correspond with you and make sure that the chairman sees your question. Announcements. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda. Winning the War of Ideas. For a worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, visit theburningspear.com. For revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans from all over the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, which broadcasts out of St. Petersburg, Florida, but is accessible via the Black Power 96 free mobile app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. Did you unite with what you heard today and want to learn more about how you can get involved with the African People's Socialist Party? Visit apspuhuru.org for all information regarding how you can apply. Join the Freedom Mass Choir and Band. The Freedom Mass Choir and Band is an all-African community group of singers and instrumentalists that perform songs of resistance and revolution. Members are located throughout the United States and attend weekly rehearsals both in person and via live stream and video. Sign up by emailing blackpowerchoir@gmail.com or call 727-537-6736. If you're local to the city of St. Petersburg, come join us today at the Uhuru House at 3 p.m. for the Black Power on the Rise event celebration hosted by Black Power 96.3 FM and Uhuru Foods and Pies. We are celebrating the victory of expanding our radio coverage area, and that's only happened because of the support we received from the community. It's a free community event packed with cultural performances, pie tastings, and a presentation from our very own Chairman Omali Yeshitela. This November and December, Uhuru Foods and Pies is calling on you to come to Oakland, California, or St. Petersburg, Florida, to be a part of baking and selling 10,000 Uhuru pies to support the programs of the Black Power Blueprint. Uhuru Pies is a 37-year-old loved progressive tradition in California and Florida. From November 15th to 22nd, and from December 20th to 24th, brigades will meet at the Aquaba Hall for overviews and summations, be out in the community selling Uhuru pies, including the signature Uhuru sweet potato pie, baking, phone banking, and winning people to support Black self-determination and reparations to Black Power Blueprint. We need you to be a part of selling pies at 12 pop-ups on Thanksgiving Day itself, followed by a reparations for Black Power Blueprint dinner at Aquaba Hall. Sign up at uhurupies.org. December 9th through 16th, come cruise with us aboard the Marcus Garvey Legacy Cruise. A time for revolutionaries to kick back and relax. You'll be on board with Chairman Omali Yeshitela while getting to enjoy the spoils of the ship. Destinations include Grand Cayman, Mahogany Bay, Belize, and Cozumel, Mexico. Get signed up today at uhurulegacycruise.org. This cruise also serves as a fundraiser for the African Socialist International, and you can make donations at the same website, uhurulegacycruise.org. Thank you all for watching this study, and be back with us next Sunday at 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern for the next Omali Taught Me. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Before cutting off, can we announce Portland, Oregon, and Seattle for people who are watching who in that area? You know, we'll be on the day of reparation for African people that will be occurring in Portland, Oregon. And what's the date for that? What is the date for that? What's the date for that? I just want the information. The 12th? That's November 12th. And where?
November 12th
Where
in
can
Portland.
they go to get the information?
Uhuru, they can go on the Uhuru Solidarity Movement page on Facebook, as well as uhurusolidarymovement.org.
Uhuru Solidarity page on Facebook, and Uhuru Solidarity where?
.org.
.org. And so that's going to be on the 12th in Portland, Oregon. So come out for that. I'll be speaking there. And what day will the one in Seattle occur? And on November 14th, we'll be in Seattle, Washington, and want everybody to come out, participate in that discussion, and that incredibly important event. It's part of the ways that we are spreading African internationalism and the movement for reparations and winning white solidarity with the struggle of African people. So that's Days of Solidarity with African people, Days of Reparation for African people. Again, that's going to be in Seattle, Washington on November 14th. And Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Thank you.